Quick question. Would you say no directly to a client? In business English, how you say no can decide whether you keep or lose the client. If you sound too aggressive, you risk damaging the relationship. If you sound too flexible, you lose control of the project. So, how do professionals negotiate in English while still sounding collaborative and respectful? Here's your first challenge. The client asks for an earlier deadline. Listen carefully. How does Abigail avoid saying no? What phrases does she use to stay polite but firm?
We were wondering if you could deliver the project 2 weeks earlier than planned.
2 weeks earlier? That's quite a change.
Yes, our internal deadline has been moved up.
I see. I understand why you'd want to speed things up.
So can you make it happen?
Moving the entire timeline forward might be difficult, especially since the design phase alone takes about 2 weeks.
I understand. Is there anything you could do to help us meet the earlier deadline?
What we could do is deliver the first section earlier while keeping the rest of the schedule the same.
All right, that could work. It would still help us get started sooner.
Notice what Abigail did there? She didn't reject the idea. Instead, she acknowledged the request and suggested an alternative. That's the key to professional negotiation. Here are some useful negotiation phrases for you to practice. I understand why you'd want to. It might be challenging to. What we could do is. That could work. Most project negotiations come down to 3 things: timeline, budget, and scope. You just heard how Abigail handled a timeline request. Now let's listen to a budget conversation. Notice how Abigail responds when the client asks for a lower price.
Your proposal looks good, but the quote is slightly higher than we expected. Would there be any flexibility on the price?
We might be able to adjust the scope slightly if that helps with the budget.
What do you mean by that?
For example, we could focus on the core features first and add the additional ones in a later phase. It would also allow us to deliver the first version faster.
All right, let's explore that option.
Great. I'll update the proposal to reflect that approach.
Notice how Abigail kept the negotiation collaborative and solution-focused. Here are some useful phrases you can try. I appreciate you sharing that. We might have a little room to. We could focus on. Let's explore that option. These phrases help negotiations feel like problem solving, not confrontation. A helpful way to think about negotiation language is to acknowledge, explain, and offer an option. The third type of negotiation is scope change, when the client asks for more features or additional work. Listen to how Abigail responds while keeping the conversation cooperative.
We were also wondering if you could include a mobile app version of the platform.
A mobile version? That's an interesting idea. I can see how that would be useful for your users.
Can you add it to this phase of the project?
It could be possible, but we'd likely need to extend the timeline a bit.
How much extra time are we talking about?
Probably around 3 additional weeks for development and testing.
I see.
Another option could be to launch the main platform first and introduce the mobile version in phase 2.
That might be better. That way, we can release the core product sooner.
In this situation, Abigail didn't reject the idea. Instead, she acknowledged the request and explained the trade-off. Here are some useful negotiation phrases for you to practice. I can see how that would be useful. It could be possible, but we'd likely need to. Another option could be, these phrases help you negotiate scope changes without sounding negative. Remember, effective negotiation is often about finding a workable alternative, not simply saying yes or no. Now it's your turn. Imagine a client asks for an additional feature, a faster timeline, or a lower price. Put your response in the comments. Remember to acknowledge, explain, offer an option.